this morning. As I was driving in this morning, I was thinking, gee, I don't have a commute story. And then I thought, yes, I do. Do you remember at least 3 years ago, and it is at least that long, that I stood at this podium and said, gee, I hope I live long enough to see I-75 finished. It's finished. It's finished. But sometimes you can't get to it from where you are. And I discovered that they are closing one of my favorite access routes to it. I come up the Southfield from 94, and then I get on 696 and drive like a maniac up to 75. And it said, starting May 6th, the Southfield exit will be closed. I thought, I'm going to have to find a whole new path. And I don't like any of the old ones. So God, show me a new one. And that, friends, in a way, is what we're talking about today. How may I know God? And what does that really mean? What does that mean? That is something that I don't want to say struggled with, because I don't believe our spirituality should be a struggle. But it can be an exercise in exploration. So it is something that I have explored for quite a while. What does it really mean to know God? And I'm thinking, okay, I remember what I was taught as a very young child. Your purpose on earth here is to know, love, and serve God. And the instruction that I received in that was very specific, very, very specific. You knew God through prayer and attending worship service and performing other rituals. You loved God by being good, not stealing cookies out of the cookie jar, or if you had a sibling, you didn't, steal their toys or anything like that. Know, love, and serve God. And serving God meant all kinds of things, like giving to charity. When there was a charity food drive, you made sure that you had a can of something or a box of something to take in. Or when there was something that was called the Bishop's Clothing Drive, whether you thought so or not, your mom would go through your closet and say, you're not wearing that lately, so we're giving that one away. Well, wait a minute, I like that one. No, we're giving that one away. You've got another one. The person who's going to get this may not have even one sweater. So there were definitely parameters of how to serve, how to know and how to love God. And then, of course, as I became an adult, it was somewhat different. And I thought knowing, loving, and serving God can't be quite that simple. It should be more complicated. Well, that's where anytime you should on yourself, you're setting yourself up for problems. So I looked at this and I thought, what do we really mean? What does it mean to know God? And how may I know God? And of course, the words that popped into my head were something that for 2 years I stared at very, very frequently, because they are inscribed on the back wall of a small chapel at Unity Village. And many of us would go in there between classes or after class or whatever and just sit in the silence. There were, I believe, 6 really beautiful but totally uncomfortable wooden chairs in there. So you never risked falling asleep, but it was exceedingly quiet and it was wonderful. And here's what it said on the back wall. It said, be still, be still, be still, be still, and know that God is. Be still and know that God is. Be still and know that I am God. And that those two words, be still. How long do I have to be still? How often do I have to be still? What does it mean to be still? And I will tell you, 37 years ago when I went to ministerial school, being still, had a completely different meaning from what it means today. My son and I were having a conversation about there is no still. The question is always, so what are you doing now? Nobody ever says, so what happened recently? Or, so what are you thinking about? It's, so what are you doing now? We are supposed to be doings instead of beings. And what has Scripture said to us? That the avenue to our knowing God is by being still. I really liked that in the sense that it gave me a sense of direction. And then I thought to myself, yeah, but knowing, what does it mean to know? And I thought, knowing. And then I ran across a phrase in a book that I was reading, and it said, the difference between knowing about God and experiencing God. And I thought, oh yeah, we know a lot about God, especially people who choose to make a commitment to live a spiritual life. We're reading scripture, we're reading books, we're reading prayers, we're reading all kinds of things. We're taking classes, we're going to worship services, we're listening to podcasts, we're listening to this, that, and the other thing. We're going away on retreats. We're going, doing. But are we being still? And what do we know? What do we really know? I don't mean to scare anybody, but have you ever just sat there and said, is God really there? Maybe in the midst of some trial or some crisis, you sat there and said, is God really there? Do I really know that there is a God there? And what do I know about it? Well, I know a lot of things about it. Maybe you know some of the same things. I know that that God is a little bit like Santa Claus, always watching, sees you no matter where you are, and knows whether you're naughty or nice. And God's parameters of naughty and nice are a little different, I think, from Santa Claus's, but they're much more consequential. Because what we're taught is, if you follow the rules, you'll be fine. If you don't, you're in for it. That message is very, very clear in all of our scriptures, and I thought, isn't that kind of frightening? That, golly, I have to watch myself constantly. And what does watch myself constantly mean? Does it mean, and you know this one already, does it mean that when I walk into my bathroom in my nightgown and I look in the mirror and go, good morning, God, what are we going to do today? Do I have to watch myself while I'm saying that? No. That's the real me. Hair askew, nightgown askew, and I'm going, good morning, God. Thank you for yesterday. What are we going to do today? And I find that statement opens me up to possibility. Because the other statement that I say to myself every morning, and some of you that take class with me on Wednesday that know we always begin with this, thank you, God, for turning consciousness to me this morning. This soul you have given me is pure. I see in it infinite possibility. All right, right there, we have three, what I would call bones of contention. This soul that you have given me is pure. Well, not according to some traditions. And I recently had a very interesting discussion with a lady, I would say well into her 50s, maybe 60s, who was raised about the same time I was in the Catholic tradition. And she said, I think I'd like to be rebaptized. And I said, rebaptized? Why? I said, because, and I said, have you spoken to a priest about this? And she said, not yet. And I said, my understanding is that the purpose of baptism in the Christian religion is the removal of the concept of original sin, that spot or a stain on our soul that arises from Adam and Eve's error action in paradise. And once it's gone, it's gone. It's like it's cleaned. And I said, so why? And she said, I don't know. I don't know. And I thought, that is probably the best space for her to be in, because it opens her up to what? Possibility. I see in this soul that you have given me infinite possibility. She can explore how she can know, how she can love, and how she can serve God. And I said, well, you know, if you ever want to talk about that, you know where to find me. She has my phone number from some other way. I said, okay, fine. And I let it go with that. And I thought, what does it really mean to know? And good heavens, even before I ever went to seminary in 1987, I was what you'd call a spiritual reader. I was always reading some book about spirituality. And I felt that I knew a lot about God, but it was book knowledge. It was not the experience of knowing God present to me. I thought, wow, I'm getting on in life. I think I better explore this aspect of my relationship to God. So I began a different approach. I tried for new awarenesses. I discovered unity. I started going, of course, to every class, to every service, reading every possible book. You know, we get so excited. You know, I mean, I could have bought the bookstore if I'd had enough money. And I was so excited. And yet I realized it was still book knowledge. But what I wanted was the direct experience of God. Now, pausing there for a moment. If we go into historical writings, it is very interesting that there are a number of books or papers or writings of what we would call holy people. There are particular saints who have said they've experienced the fragrance of God. The fragrance of God. There's a very famous picture of, I believe it is St. Teresa of Avila. She looks like, and it's supposed to be the moment in which she experienced God. But of course she didn't write about it. So we are left to our own interpretation of what that looks like. And I would ask each one of us, have we ever had that moment where, how can I put this? We were just smacked upside this head and experienced the presence of God? I don't know. It's so unusual, it's hard for us to determine. And that's what makes this issue of how do we know God a challenge for us. What I would like to say, however, is that what I've learned from my own studies, both in spirituality and a master's in clinical psychology, and unity work, is it must unite mind and heart. It must unite our mind and our heart. Because without the heart influence, we have nothing more than a collection of intellectual facts. And folks, intellectual facts don't keep you warm on a cold night. They don't bring you comfort when you're sitting in a hospital room. They don't bring you consolation at a memorial service. It is what we are able to experience through our emotions, through our feelings. Some of you know that a couple of, last month it was, I did a Zoom service because I was in Monroe, Michigan. And I was participating as an assistant in an intensive weekend, an intensive psychospiritual renewal weekend. And people were processing, and when I say processing, they were bringing up trials and traumas of their life and discussing them in front of a bunch of strangers because we had created a safe space. And before our eyes, we could see the release of fear, the release of pain, the release of anger, and see them transformed. I mean, see them transformed. You could see someone who was standing there in such a tense moment, filled with anger, begin to relax. We would see a new awareness on their face. And I understood the concept, again, of transformation. In other words, change in form, meaning also change in experience. And I thought, this is what we need. How do we know God? Let's put the books away for a while, just not too far away, close enough that if we want to check something out, we can, and not ever giving them up, but saying, just for the moment, I'm going to be still. Okay, maybe that moment was too long for some of us. Maybe it wasn't long enough. Every single minister that I have ever known in Unity has always said, so how long do you meditate in the worship service? And we get everything from 3 to 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And we're going, 10 minutes? They're silent for 10 minutes? Or you go, 3 minutes. What can you do in 3 minutes? You know, we're all over the place on this. Friends, what did Jesus say? The kingdom comes in the twinkling of an eye. In the twinkling of an eye. The second in which we experience the presence of God is that second. It's that blink. It's that moment. And so we look at this, and what we are striving for is a new awareness, a new awareness. And as I've said, the necessity of the integration of mind and heart, because we know that we are composed of thinking and feeling. And we know so well that statement, as a person thinketh in their heart, so are they. So is insignificant. But what does it say? As a person thinks. So where are we thinking? We're thinking up here in our head, but where is the activity occurring? It's happening in our heart, the center of our emotion. And what is this? Every morning when I wake up and that furry little kitty, Dizzy, is right next to me on my bed, friends, I have experienced the presence of God. I roll over if I'm on the wrong side, and I put my arm around him and I start petting him and muttering into his little fur, oh, you're such a good kitty, you're such a sweet kitty, oh honey, I love you so much. And he just kind of sighs. Okay, I don't know that my cat knows that there's a God. We haven't had that conversation. But I know that in that connection with this other living being, I am experiencing the creative power, the creative energy, the living energy of what I call God, And then for the rest of us, I know quite a few people in this congregation who have dogs, who have cats, who have birds. I don't know anybody. I know somebody who's got chickens, but she's not here today. And then there are people who don't have an animal, but they're fortunate enough to have people around them. For those of us who live alone, that can be a challenge. We don't have another image of God right there in front of us. On the other hand, for some of us, we do, and we're thinking, no way could that possibly be God. I know, you can smirk and you can smile there. Yeah, we've all been there, folks. We love them to pieces, but they can drive us crazy on occasion. And there, friends, is a perfect example. Maybe we don't live with them. Maybe we live next door to them, or they live up the street, or it's somebody at the next desk, or it's, gosh golly, it's anybody walking down the street who offers us an image of God. And what is our response? I'll tell you what mine is sometimes. Oh my God, will you look at that? Was that judgmental? You bet. And in that moment, I was not knowing God, and I was not loving God. So it's incumbent upon us to be aware, to be aware. We join the thinking and the feeling nature. We join them together. We join them together. What I'm thinking, and then I thought, well, how are we going to do this? This seems like a rather daunting task. By the way, I wanted to go back to that psalm, which I just read you, Psalm 46, which says, "Be still and know that I am God," because the front of it is pretty distressing. The beginning is good. It says, "God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear, even if earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge." And I thought, isn't that interesting? Do you know that the Psalms were written over a period of 1,500 years? And I thought to myself, wow, we could have listened to last night's weather forecast. You know, I happened to run into a good friend whom I'd not seen for quite a while, who lives in Tennessee, and I said, oh my goodness, every time I watch the national weather, I'm thinking of you folks. He goes, it's okay. We're in the eastern end of the state, and the mountains are between us, and the people on the west side of the mountains are getting it. We're okay. I was like, that's really good to know. That's really good to know. And then he goes on and says, a river brings joy to the city of God, the sacred home of the Most High. God himself, okay, this is the old T. God himself lives in that city. It cannot be destroyed. God will protect it at the break of day. And I thought, okay, that's good. And then we went on, and it says, the nations are in an uproar, the kingdoms crumble, God thunders, and the earth melts. And I thought, what is this? Now, prophecy, as I have explained to you on more than one occasion, is not foretelling the future. It is informing us of the consequences of choices. In other words, prophecy says, you do A, you get A. You do B, you get B. And we're looking at this, and we're saying, and then I read the article the next day, which said that the southern coast of the United States, from about Galveston, Texas, over to Carolina, the ocean has risen between 6 and 9 inches. Folks, 6 and 9 inches. 6, okay, that's 7 right there. So add another 2. That's a lot of water rise. That is changing access to land. That is altering the fish, which are a living job for people along coastlines. But it says that God is there for us. It says, come see the glorious works of the Lord. See how God brings destruction upon the world and causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear in two. He burns the shields with fire. I always have a lot of problems with these things. I'm not keen on them, but they're there, and they're for a purpose. When it says bows and arrows, and we know what that means today, that means drones, that means bombs, that means tanks. And it's like, gosh golly, haven't we gotten a clue yet? Apparently we have not, because we are still making those choices which bring us into situations where we really want to know God. This is not a talk in which I'm saying life is miserable and you have to go through it. What I'm saying is life is what it is. It's got good days, bad days, medium days. I have a coffee cup that says, it is what it is. It's great. When I drink it in the morning, I remind myself it is what it is. It is what we choose to perceive it as. And I thought, how are we going to know God. And then I thought, through the beauty of our unity teaching, Mr. Fillmore and Mrs. Fillmore, Charles and Myrtle, put together a structure for us friends. They're not just pretty words on a piece of paper. They are a structure that enables us to build what? A consciousness. And I call that the 12 powers. And immediately I'm thinking, okay, which ones? And the first one that came to my mind was faith. Why would I even be interested in knowing God if I wasn't sure there was one? So the first choice is, do I or don't I accept the fact that there is a God? And you know what popped into my head? This terribly, terribly old song. This was a wee bit before my time, but I always remembered it. There was some jazzy song that was, is you is or is you ain't my baby? Okay, a couple of other people remember that one, probably from records. And I thought, that's what it comes down to. Are you there or are you not there, God? And if you're there, where are you? And the first truth that unity tells us, God is where? Within. Within. Not just me, each one of you. And each one of the people that's walking down the street, and the people on the other side of the planet, the people who aren't even up yet, the people who have already gone to bed. All of us are that example of God. So how do we get to know those people? The first is believing is making a choice. And that's what I'm saying. Making a choice to say, yeah, there's a God. If you want to put a capital G on it, fine. If you want to put a lowercase g on it, okay. If you want to call it something else, a higher power, an energy, a being, it doesn't matter. But it is the force within us, the living force within us, that makes us who we are. God is. I am. We are. Then the second power that we need to exercise is willingness. Because we could very easily sit there and go, well, that's a nice story. I'm not going to do anything about that. It doesn't have any significance for me. Willingness is our power of commitment. We're going to say, I'm going to choose to believe there is that power in the world and in my life and in everyone else, whether I can see it or not see it. Because friends, when we watch television or wherever we're looking at, and we see mountains sliding across roads, wiping out villages, floods obliterating towns, fires raging through forests, as we all sniffed and blew our noses a short while back when the Canadian forests were on fire, we're going, this can't be. And the answer is, maybe not, but it is in this moment the reality of our existence. How do we choose to respond to it? And that's the willingness where we exercise that faith which says, I believe there is a God, there is a divine order which unfolds in this world for each and every one of us. That power. And I thought, well, 3 is always a good number, so I got to find another power. And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, oh, I know, my favorite one, imagination. You know, the scissors of the mind, the picking shears of the mind. I love that power. I'm always thinking, you know, I'm highly visual, so I'm always click, 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 creating pictures in my mind of God in form. God in form. I look at, you all, some of you know more than others, because I often talk about it on class, I'm a big bird feeder. No, not me, but I feed the birds. I mean, I am really good with the birds. They have put out the word 2604 on the back deck. She's got suet cakes, she's got seed, and she puts out bread crusts. Oh, and she puts out peanuts in shells. Yoo-hoo, squirrels. And they all get along together. They all get along together. The squirrels come, I'm really such a good mommy, because when I put the 5 peanuts, unsalted, unroasted, you can get them for $2.49 a pound at one of our major supermarkets. I'm not going to advertise here, but snoop around, you'll find it. I step on them to break the shell. Why? Because have you ever noticed? The little squirrels don't have opposable thumbs. They got 4 little toes, but they don't have opposable thumbs. So getting the peanut out of the shell is a little bit of a challenge. But if you break it, they are able to open it more easily. And I know that they know, because when I named her Audrey, because she's audacious, one day she literally climbed up the entire length of the screen from the bottom to the top. There she was, hanging like this, and I thought, wow, that's audacious. Let's call her Audrey. She comes every day. She comes right up to the door. She looks at me like, I don't see any squirrel. I don't see any peanuts. And I go, wait, honey, wait. And I open the jar, and I pause, and very slowly open the glass door, and then I wait a little bit, and I open the screen door enough for my hand to go out and throw the peanuts out. And there she is, right on it. Looks at me and takes it away. Friends, to me, that is knowing the presence of God in its simplest, creative, demonstrative, loving awareness of our union with all living things. There's something else. Each one of us, within us, has some aspect of our personality. That's why we chose the hymn that we did, Open My Eyes That I May See. Using our 5 senses, opening our eyes, looking around and going, oh, that's God over there. Hearing sounds, hearing birds. Remember how loud the birds were during COVID? Yeah, because there was no traffic. We're not hearing them as well because the traffic's back, because people are back on the highway by 6 a.m. in the morning. But using our senses to become aware of God present, knowing God through our embodiment, enables us to know God, to love God. So imagination, where else can we find God? How many of you have lilacs? Yep. Or had hyacinths? Or will have roses? Well, you just run out there and you stick your nose right into that flower and go, and that is the presence of God, friends. That is the fragrance of God. And when the water runs over your hand, even if it's not in a stream, if it's just coming out of that faucet in your sink, think of that as the flowing life of God. That is our imagination. But the major question, of course, is to what end, to what purpose would I want to know God so intensely? And for that, I found one of my favorite Psalms, which is Psalm 27. Psalm 27 begins like this: The Lord is my light and my salvation. Why should I be afraid? The Lord protects me from danger. So why should I tremble? When evil people come to destroy me, when my enemies and foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will know no fear. Even if they attack me, I remain confident. Okay, I have a little problem with, the army and being attacked and all that sort of stuff. But we know that there are things in life which we do not consider good. And when those things appear, dangers, etc., we know that we are in God's care. But here, for me, is the idea. The one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek most, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in God's temple. Does that mean we're going to move to a monastery? No. Does it mean we are going to cultivate a consciousness of living in the presence of God, who is where? Already within. Oh, hello, God. I didn't realize you were there. Yes, you are. That's why I give you that exercise every morning when you wake up and you think you are at your least best with fuzzy hair and bleary eyes and who knows what else, and to walk into the bathroom and look in the mirror and go, "Good morning, God. What are we going to do today?" You have already engaged your awareness that God is present to you and that you are knowing with mind and heart that that presence can be expressed in the world. Where else do we see God? As I said, in that mirror, when we look at one another, when we walk around. I see God in myself. I see God in you. We see God in our community. And that is our goal, to be aware of our presence as God. That is how we know God. That's our greatest option. How do I know God? And what does it mean? It means that I am living the life that God intended me to be, an individualized expression of itself. And with those words, I invite you to become quiet, to put down from your lap anything that might distract you, to find a space to look at or simply close your eyes, and to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And once again, in very consciously filling your lungs with the air that God gives us, and then blowing it out. Dear God within me, I know what you look like. You look like me. You look like the person next to me, the person across the street, the person on the other side of the planet. Each of us is the perfect vision of you in our infinite diversity. In our infinite diversity is your creativity expressed. When I look out my window at the sky, at the birds who fly by, at the ones who come and peck at my feet or at my syrup cake. Yes, even when they poop on the railing. I know. It is your presence, your creativity expressing. When I look at the world, sometimes I am inclined to go, oh dear. And yet, when I remind myself there is a power greater than myself that lives and moves and dwells within me as me, and I am able and competent to meet all things in my life, I am grateful. I have a purpose. To be a living, moving example of your goodness, your love for us, your infinite presence in all things. Is it significant for me to know God? Yes. And how do I? Very simply, by being still and knowing who I am. Our ability to recognize God is based on our awareness of our identity. I am one in God. Let's just take a moment in silence to let that seep into our being. And having filled ourselves consciously, purposefully, with our awareness of God, we move forth into this world to be that expression. And we affirm that by singing and praying together the Lord's Prayer.